In 2009, a small town in West Virginia reported something that police could never explain. Animals were being found in the forests, completely drained of blood, with only two tiny puncture marks on their necks. Then, a college student disappeared during a short evening walk, and the only thing investigators found was her coat hanging from a tree, with drops of blood leading into the darkness. But the most disturbing part came weeks later, when a truck driver reported seeing a pale man standing beside an empty highway at 3 a.m. A man who vanished into the forest faster than any human possibly could. Some locals believe these events are connected to an ancient legend, the legend of Dracula. The story begins in the quiet Appalachian town of Black Hollow, West Virginia, a place where the forests are so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground even in the middle of the day. The town had always been strange, but no one outside the region paid much attention to it until the winter of 2009, when a series of bizarre incidents began surfacing. At first, it started with animals being found drained of blood along the outskirts of town. Farmers discovered goats and deer lying in the snow with small puncture wounds in their necks. Local police dismissed it as the work of predators, maybe coyotes or wild dogs. But the problem was that predators don't drink blood so precisely, and predators don't leave bodies untouched. One night in January, a local truck driver named Daniel Harper was driving down Route 33 after finishing a late shift at a lumber yard. The road was empty, the fog thick, and the temperature hovering just above freezing. As his headlights cut through the mist, he noticed something strange standing near the tree line. At first, he thought it was a person hitchhiking, but as his truck slowed, the figure stepped closer into the light. Daniel later told police the man looked pale, unnaturally pale, with dark eyes that reflected the headlights like an animal's. He wore what looked like an old black coat, something that seemed completely out of place for that area. Daniel rolled down the window to ask if he needed help, but before he could speak, the man suddenly disappeared back into the forest with a speed Daniel described as not human. 2 weeks later, the town experienced its first missing person case connected to the mystery. A college student named Rachel Morris had returned home for winter break. One evening, she went out for a short walk near the forest trails she had known since childhood. She never returned. Search teams combed the woods for days until they found her coat hanging from a tree branch, about half a mile from the trail. There were no footprints around it, no signs of struggle. But investigators did find something unsettling: small droplets of blood leading deeper into the woods before abruptly stopping, as if whoever left them had simply vanished. Rumors began spreading quickly through Black Hollow. Some residents whispered about an old legend passed down through generations of Appalachian families. According to the story, sometime in the late 1800s, a man arrived in the region from Eastern Europe. He kept to himself, bought land deep within the forest, and was rarely seen during the day. People claimed he only appeared at night, traveling between towns under different names. Some believed he was connected to the old folklore of vampires that immigrants had brought from Europe, stories similar to the infamous figure known in literature as Count Dracula. Around the same time these rumors resurfaced, a group of amateur paranormal investigators decided to visit Black Hollow. They were inspired by the legacy of the classic vampire myth, popularized by the 1897 novel Dracula written by Bram Stoker. Their goal was simple: document strange occurrences and prove whether the town's legend had any truth behind it. One member of the team, Michael Jensen, later uploaded recordings from their investigation. In one clip recorded at around 2:14 a.m., a strange shadow can be seen moving rapidly between trees behind the group. What terrified viewers wasn't just the movement, it was the speed. The figure crossed nearly 30 feet in less than a second. Not long after that video appeared online, another strange event occurred. A security camera outside a gas station captured a man walking across the parking lot at around 3 a.m. The footage was unsettling because the man didn't appear to cast a visible shadow despite the bright overhead lights. His face was partially hidden, but witnesses who saw the footage claimed he looked extremely pale, with sharp facial features and dark eyes. The most disturbing detail was the timestamp. The figure walked across the lot and simply vanished at the edge of the camera frame. Yet, when investigators checked the next camera covering that same area, there was no sign of him continuing down the road. As news spread across the internet, online forums began connecting the Black Hollow incidents to other strange reports across the United States. Similar stories had appeared in parts of Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and even rural areas of Ohio. In many of those cases, the pattern was the same. Sightings of a pale man dressed in dark clothing, animals found drained of blood, and occasional disappearances that authorities could never fully explain. One retired police officer from Ohio later came forward with a story from the 1980s. According to him, several livestock deaths in his county had identical characteristics to the ones seen in Black Hollow decades later. The animals were intact, but almost completely drained of blood. At the time, officials blamed unknown predators, but the officer admitted something about the wounds had never made sense. Back in Black Hollow, the fear among residents slowly grew. People began avoiding the forest after sunset. Businesses started closing earlier. Even the local sheriff's department quietly advised citizens to travel in groups at night. But the most chilling moment came during the spring of 2010. A pair of teenagers decided to explore an abandoned house located deep in the forest. The property had reportedly belonged to a reclusive immigrant family that disappeared sometime in the early 20th century. Inside the basement, the teens discovered something strange carved into the wooden beams, symbols resembling old Eastern European markings associated with protection against vampires. There were also dozens of rusted iron spikes hammered into the walls, something historians say was sometimes used in ancient folklore to trap or restrain supernatural creatures. When the teens shared photos of the basement online, paranormal researchers immediately recognized the symbols as protective wards historically used in regions connected to the real historical figure, Vlad the Impaler, the 15th century ruler whose brutal reputation helped inspire the Dracula legend centuries later. The house was eventually investigated by authorities, but by then the basement had been partially collapsed by what officials claimed was structural damage. Many of the carvings were destroyed. No official explanation was ever released about the symbols. To this day, the mystery of Black Hollow remains unsolved. The missing student, Rachel Morris, was never found. The livestock deaths eventually stopped as mysteriously as they began, and sightings of the pale man faded into local folklore. But every few years, a strange report surfaces somewhere in the Appalachian region. A truck driver sees a figure standing beside a deserted road at night. A hunter hears footsteps moving through the forest far too fast for any human. Or someone finds an animal lying silently in the woods, with 2 small puncture wounds in its neck. Most people dismiss these stories as exaggerations or coincidences. After all, modern science says vampires cannot exist, but the forests around Black Hollow are vast, ancient, and largely unexplored. And sometimes, when the fog rolls through the trees late at night, locals say they still see a tall, pale figure watching silently from the darkness, waiting